questions that were submitted related to the relationship between research and practice. And so our members would like to hear a little bit about how some of your careers evolved from clinical practice into the role of nurse researcher. So, May, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was in clinical practice in psychiatric nursing before becoming an educator. And then I was at Case Western Reserve, and I was teaching, and I thought that's what my world existed of, until one day my dean, Joyce Fitzpatrick, asked me what research did I do, and I said, I teach. I don't do research. And she says, well, you'll be doing research from now on. So that started my career. And I had started with a academic award from the National Institutes of Mental Health. And I started working with one of my mentors and became interested in self-care of older adults. And that's how I started. And from then I went into, I was head of the Robert Wood Johnson, one of the Robert Wood Johnson teaching nursing homes, and then became interested in all kinds of research that was related to gerontology, but particularly to caregivers.
Very good. How about Dr. Fairman? Mm-hmm. How did you evolve from a practicing nurse to a nurse historian?
A lot of people ask me that, actually. You know, I practiced for about 10 years as a clinical specialist in a renal transplant clinic and also as a critical care nurse. And I developed a lot of questions. Practice drove everything that I do, all the work that I do in terms of the history of critical care, the relationship between gender and technology, and in the work that I've done on nurse practitioners in terms of how do we decide as a country and as a society who should provide particular kinds of care to particular populations at different times and places, and how are those things negotiated. So practice really drove everything that I do.
I'm sure many of our participants will be excited to hear that there's a future in the work that they're doing. Mary, tell us a little bit about how your career evolved in that way.
In terms?
From practice to research.
My early research, or my early practice, was in public health nursing. And I worked in an official public health department. And within that role, I worked as a school nurse. So I was very involved with elementary, middle school, and high school students as a school nurse. And also I served as a coordinator in the WIC program for women, infants, and children. So my whole practice base was in public health in the official arena. And I enjoyed those experiences tremendously. It was a wonderful experience, and it was from that experience is what really moved me from the practice to the research, and that was, why are these things occurring? Why are these children sicker than other children? Why are these diseases occurring more in this group versus that group? And it was my practice with children and women that really helped encourage me to go on and determine what are the research questions in this area.
Well, now that you've become researchers, what have you done in recent years to help practicing nurses connect your research to their practice? Inga?
This is a great opportunity. I'm very happy to talk about this because I'm going to do some PR. I'm just working with the American Journal of Nursing. We have a new blog entitled So What, Making a Difference. And the idea of the blog is to have researchers who usually spend most of the article talking about the research study and then a little bit about implications for practice, to turn that on its head and talk just a little bit, describe the study, and really speak to the implications for practice. That's part of it. The other part of the blog is for practicing nurses to speak to research that really changed their practice. with the idea that we can help diffuse that. Ask those individuals to talk about how they incorporated it, but then develop with help with diffusion of the innovation. And diffusion of innovations was my PhD thesis.
Perfect.
I'd like to answer that.
Wipita, tell us how that happens in your part of the world.
About my research too.
How you help practitioners to use your scholarly work.
Actually, I just start with first time that I work first. Okay, I've start my work in OBGYN as a nurse faculty first, because at the time we become the nurse faculty, and also we still work in the clinic too. And I start with the research in for postpartum care, and then I think that time nurses in the clinic also can apply my research result. And after that, I changed a few into nursing administration and also in leadership. But I'm still working on quality of care. So I developed like the indicators for nursing care indicator in Thailand. So right now, they still use some of the indicators that we develop, and I think that is going to go to practice too.
Excellent. Deborah, tell us how you guide practicing nurses to use your research.
I think that lately, because our research has started to really move to the community, so I started off as a critical care nurse, and it was a little more difficult, although I spent a lot of time talking about the results of the research and really how nurses could apply it to critical care folks when I was doing critical care research. But now, one of the things that we really try to do is always include practitioners and people from the community. So not just practitioners anymore, but we're sort of moving into a community-based model of cardiovascular risk reduction in Appalachia and actually in the prison population. So we have 2 ongoing intervention programs in both those populations. And we have really tried to take our intervention and figure out how to train people in the area. So in our Appalachian project, we train people who work in senior centers and see seniors every day, how to deliver the intervention. We have had a number of people who come from businesses, local businesses. We have had people within their businesses learn how to deliver the intervention. We're working with definitely all the local practitioners in the area about the importance of cardiovascular risk reduction and incorporating all of those important risk reduction factors into everyday practice and everyday life, not everyday practice. See, I'm still back in the nurse practice. And so I think that that's really has been our approach lately, is to teach everybody everywhere who has an interaction with the patients, the individuals, the prisoners, anyone who is in need of cardiovascular risk reduction, who is almost everybody, how to deliver cardiovascular risk reduction interventions.
Very good. Bern, you've done a lot of work in this area. Talk to us about how you've helped practicing nurses use your body of research.
Well, many of you know me. I am passionate about evidence-based practice, and I have been so blessed with my wonderful friend and colleague, Dr. Ellen Fine-Overholt, to travel throughout the United States and the globe in working with practicing nurses and healthcare systems about how to implement findings from research into clinical practice to improve care. And I'd really like to say, through all our travels, it is so obvious that when we continue to teach research the way we've always done it in our educational programs, it develops a sense of negativity in practicing nurses, sincerely, about evidence-based practice. And we need to, through our work with so many educational institutions, about how to better integrate research into practice in our educational programs and teach people about how to do evidence-based practice instead of continuing to teach the process of rigorous research. in our educational programs, we can further facilitate EBP. We have to get people excited about evidence-based practice and teach them the skills that they need, not information alone, because information alone doesn't translate into behavior change. So skills building is a very important part of what we need to do with both our students and practicing nurses.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to think back to sort of your career evolution as a nurse researcher. And let's start with Dr. Campbell down there. Tell us, was there a person who inspired you to pursue a career in nursing research or a situation?
Well, I have been blessed with many mentors, many wonderful mentors. Probably the person that comes to mind the most is Peggy Chin, who is now the editor of Advances in Nursing Science, who was the chair of my master's thesis at Wright State University. And I was thinking when other people were talking, I too was a school nurse, Mary, and when I was getting my master's, part of my clinical experience was to go out and prevent something in the community. So I went to the population I knew. I had worked in a inner city high school in Dayton, Ohio. And so I looked to see from the mortality tables what was killing young African American women the most. And that was homicide. It was then, and now it's actually the #2 cause of death for young African American women. Unfortunately, HIV/AIDS has sort of taken over and neck with homicide. And when I first saw that, I thought, well, I don't know anything about homicide, so I can't do that. What's #2? And Peggy said, no, sweetheart, you don't get to do that. You have to do a thesis, right? And if you're concerned about the health and well-being of young African American women, you better find out about this homicide that's killing them, because that's the kind of work you need to do. And so my first research study was, I'm probably the only nurse that did her master's thesis on homicide record review in a police homicide department. And what I found was that the majority of young African American women and white women who are killed by a husband, boyfriend, ex-husband, ex-boyfriend. I also found from those records that the majority of them had been abused before they were killed. I also saw from those records that a lot of those women had been seen in our local hospitals, in our local healthcare settings, and we as nurses had failed to identify what they were most in danger from. And so it was clear to me what I needed to do, and Peggy was very much there, encouraging me to do an out-of-the-box kind of research study and to get started in the area of violence against women, the nursing research that has become so important in that field. She was one of the people that got me started there.
Dr. Chen, what inspired you to become a nurse researcher?
Actually, when I was a undergraduate student, there were no research-related courses, including statistics. But after I graduated from the bachelor degree, I was a nurse, and I was aware of the importance of research. So I consult scholars, including nursing scholar Dr. Yumei Zhao. She was the expertise in qualitative study and in field study. And she is the first nurse obtained PhD from University of Pittsburgh. And also I consult scholars in other fields. So they are all outstanding scholars, researchers, not only, but also very enthusiastic in teaching the youngers. So they really are my role models. So
thank you.
I really thank for them. Thank you.
Kai, what inspired you?
Well, when I started my doctoral program, I had the benefit of the wisdom of my advisor,
who asked me about where I was passionate, which was about the care of children with cancer, and she advised me to stick to that topic and stay focused. So I was grateful during my program that when I'd start to drift in a little bit, I'd get yanked back into maintaining a focus in childhood cancer. And I maintained a practice during that time, and it was actually when we began to see a large number of children survive. And it was the stories of parents telling me the challenges of their children surviving the disease and trying to reintegrate into particularly academics that prompted me to look in that area. I was also really interested in knowing how the brain could be damaged by chemotherapy. And I went knocking door to door and found a neurochemist, Dr. Pak Chan, who's very well known for his work in stroke and brain injury. And he actually took me under his wing and let me in his lab. And it was from him that I learned more about the theories of injury to the brain that I was able to translate back to the effects of chemotherapy. So I felt like I was really grateful that someone who didn't know anything about nursing, who didn't know me, was willing to take a chance. So.
Thanks. Dr. Neese, was there someone who inspired you?
Yeah, there were several people that inspired me. I think early on, very early, I think it was mainly my mother who said, if you don't know something, always ask questions. And if you think about that, think how important that is, asking questions. And then in my undergraduate work, when I was doing my work, I was always fighting a battle because everyone in my cohort in the whole undergraduate program was really focused on acute care and skills, and that was the thing to do in nursing. And I was always interested in health promotion. So I was kind of going against the grain when I was an undergraduate student. And the person there was Helen Marsh, was someone who said, stick with your dreams. If you're interested in that, don't worry what everyone else says. Julia Lane told me that when I got my master's degree. Don't worry, stick with what you're interested in. And then when Judy Sullivan, when I was doing my PhD, really said stay, she and Cheryl Cox kept saying, no, 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 it's okay. This is a great area. It's a wonderful area to be. So I really see all of them as very important mentors. And then Nola Pender, when I did my postdoc at Michigan, was very instrumental in saying how important health promotion is. And it was, I can't say enough about all of my early mentors, my family, and then my mentors while I was a student in school and studying the area of health promotion, and now my family, my daughter, who constantly asks questions every day, why is this happening the way this is happening? So I feel like I'm kind of going full circle, the importance of why, the questions why, and my mentors for health promotion.
We have a lot of novice nurse researchers at the program and in the audience. Dr. Michelle, what would you tell them is a really important strategy for jump-starting a research career?
I think that the most important thing that you can do is to be very passionate about your area. You have to have reasons, and I think we've heard reasons from many of these people, of things that have interested you, that you've seen as significant, that's been important to patients that you've taken care of. I know that in my own work, that one of the things that happens, particularly in the theory work on uncertainty, that many people read about that when they're in school. It's covered in most of the courses that they take, at least at the undergraduate and master's level. And that people then, I hear from a lot of people who say, this has always been something I've been interested in, but I never knew what to call it. And now I know what to call it. Now I can go on with it. And I'm just using that as an example, but you can. As you're working as you're interested in an area, go and look and see what other people have done on that. How can you build on that? How can you make it even stronger? We have a tremendous need in nursing to have much more theory development. We have, particularly at the middle range level. And so if people have a topic that they think that I'm interested in this, I've seen this in the clinical area, that you go on with that, you take that, and you find other people who you can grow from as you learn that. That's what I've done, and I think I know that has also influenced many people out there.
Well, we're running short on time, but there's one question that I really enjoy hearing about, and that is, I'd like to hear from some of you about what is one of the most funny or amusing things that you have encountered as a nurse researcher? Fanny, do you have one? Has there been any fun along the way?
Well, I can tell a story. I don't know how funny it is, but I was starting my research career, and I was also working as a clinician. And so my job was to interview patients and ask them about pain, because that was my area of research. So the first patient I went to, and I said, could you just talk a little bit about your pain? And he said, well, I don't have pain, I have ache. And I said, okay. And I'm doing this in Swedish now, because that's not my first language. So I said, okay, but I started using the word ache, and then I went back to pain. And he said, young lady, I said ache, not pain. I said, okay, is there a difference? And he said, oh, sure it is. Why don't you ask Yuan? It was another patient. Now he's getting a larger crowd involved here. So he said, yes, there is a difference. And I said, well, tell me about it. And he said, well, ache, you know, it occurs of a larger part of the body, but pain is so localized. And he said, if you use a word like dull, then you're talking ache. But if you use a word like sharp or shooting, you're talking pain. And so I said, oh, okay. So I went home, right? I had 4 kids. I said, tell me about ache. Oh, that's what grandma has. It's in her knees. And this was something that really launched my career in the development and patented pain-o-meter, because I found out that there is a difference between pain, ache, and hurt. And these are the basic terms used to describe unpleasant experiences that patients have.
Fascinating.
So.
Thank you for that. Anyone else on this side had an interesting anecdote you'd like to share about something funny that has happened to you in your research experience? Anyone? Dr. Chen?
I would like to say the funny thing in terms of rewarding. I would like to say my most rewarding experience in doing the research. Actually, the most rewarding experience to me actually is the feedback from the international readers. And I enjoy that. I can see that I would like to say this is a pleasant research journey. And so if the research results were distributed by the international news, and the practitioners can learn from my research and do the evidence-based practice, that's which I feel rewarding.
Mm-hmm. As you should. Inga?
I actually thought of something that was part of my practice as well as my research. I was doing psychoneuroimmunology at one point in my career, focusing on that, and had people and patients do drawings of themselves. And it was back when Elizabeth Kubler-Ross had done a lot of work on drawings, particularly with children, but with adults as well. And this one gentleman did a drawing, and he did a drawing, you know, is the full page, but he did it this small. Well, you can do all sorts of, I think you all can, certainly my colleagues up here could do all sorts of interpretation. If there's a drawing this small and you've got this full blank page. But I decided to ask him, you know, how is it this whole page you did a drawing this small? He said, I'm a draftsman. We always do small drawings before we do drawings. I'm so glad I didn't do other interpretations.
Julie?
Well, to me, the most interesting experience is to mentor students, and that you see them start and grow and develop the ability to analyze and to be scholarly and to bring in their intellect. And then you see them moving on and presenting papers and becoming faculty members or doing something they love. And to me, that is one of the most rewarding and most interesting pieces of this whole journey. You know, to see that, in fact, you had some influence on other people's lives to go out and do other kinds of research and to do other scholarship. It's really, really rewarding.
I'd like to go back to an earlier event. I'd like to go back to an early event when I was a student. And I was in a social psychology program because my PhD is in psychology. And my chair at that time wasn't very enthused about the idea of uncertainty or what it could even mean. And I was concerned what was going to happen, and was I going to have to give this up, or what would I do? And then one day, and I was living out in this area where the university was, and someone said to me, he was out playing tennis today, and he's had some cardiac problems, and he's in a cardiac observation unit. So I went over to the hospital, I went into the room, I sat on the opposite bed, and I said, what do you think about uncertainty now?
Excellent. Excellent. Go ahead, Bert.
Well, I would like to also add, in addition to humor, enthusiasm. I have a saying, and that is success is going from one failure to the next with enthusiasm. We have to get excited. So many times as researchers, we so face rejection time and time again. And it gets back to the dream. You have to keep your dream bigger than your fears, and you have to persist through all of what I call the character builders. But I had a funny story I wanted to share. When I was at the University of Rochester, our team was working on the revision to an R01 grant for our premature baby study. And so all of us were in my office. We had pizza. We had everything thrown all over the office. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and this grant was due the next day. And so we're writing furiously. We're trying to think, but we got into a brain freeze, if you know what I mean. And I took out, I don't know why I had furniture polish in a drawer in my desk. I took out furniture polish and I started dusting furniture with it because I said I can think better when I'm multitasking. And we actually laughed seriously for 20 minutes until we cried because we were so exhausted in the process. But again, you just got to persist. If you really believe what you're doing is going to make a difference for your patients and your family members, despite how many rejections that you get, you just have to keep going. You have to persist.
May, you got any closing pearls for us?
Well, I just want to echo what she said about, writing grants at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I want to credit research for my weight because I had a mentor, we were working on it, and we would eat granola and thinking it was a health food, which it is healthy, but the calories, so we would devour boxes of granola because I always thought you can't put out unless you're putting in. So I'm a good example of that.
Well, please join me in thanking once again our panelists for sharing a little bit of their wisdom with us. And I invite you to rise and exit the stage. Thank you very much once again.